All right, so what we're going to do is first identify what is A, B, and C. Get off of here. Okay. All right, so my A is going to be a 1. So I had wrote this on some of your on your daily logs. It's not the exponent, it's the number that's outside, or like the number that's in front of the variable. So A is 1, B is going to be 7, and then C is going to be 12. All right, once you have that identified, you are going to plug it in to the formula. Okay, so x equals, because that's what I'm trying to find, is my x's. I'm solving for x. So x equals negative b. So negative b would be negative 7 plus or minus the square root, and then b squared, which is 7. I'm going to put that in parentheses only because if it was negative, I want to make sure I remember I have to square the negative. So b squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 12. All over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay, now to help you know the steps on how to simplify, because this looks like a hot mess right now. So your first job is to simplify the radical. So your first job is to get this piece right here down to one number. So do everything inside the radical first. That's step 1. So you can just do it in your calculator if you want, or if you can do it in your head. So 7 squared, that would be 49. And then minus 4 times 1 times 12. So minus, what is that, 30? Wow, I can't, 48, right? I can't multiply. So 49 minus 48, and that gives me a 1. Okay, I'm going to come back up to the top here so I have more room. So now I have x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 1 over, and now I can do 2 times 1. That's pretty easy in my head, 2. Okay, so now the reason why today is going to be a little easier is because all the ones I'm going to give you are going to be perfect squares. So this should be very easy to simplify. So now we can take the square root of 1, which is just 1. So I'm just going to cancel this out and say, okay, this is 1. From here now, we actually have 2 problems, and that's what this plus or minus means. So my first problem is negative 7 plus 1 divided by 2. And my second problem is negative 7 minus 1 divided by 2. So that's where I'm ending up with 2 solutions. And those are the 2 places the parabola are going to cross. That plus and minus shows that there's 2 answers. So from here, you have to do, this is actually the top of this equation. So you want to make sure that you do negative 7 plus 1 first before you divide by 2. Same thing here, do negative 7 minus 1 first and then divide by 2. So negative 7 plus 1 is negative 6. Negative 6 divided by 2 is going to be a negative 3. And then this one will be negative 7 minus 1, which is negative 8. Negative 8 divided by 2 is going to give me negative 4. So my 2 solutions for this parabola are negative 3 and negative 4. So what that means, and you don't have to write this down, but just so you understand visually what that means, is that this parabola, 1, 2, 3, 4, would cross at negative 3 and negative 4, and it would look something like this. I don't know how low it's going to dip, but it would look something like that. So that's what the solutions that you just found for the parabola. Okay, how are we doing so far? Any questions or concerns? So far, so good. All right, if you have any, let me know. I'm going to stop share just for a second because something's going crazy. I just want to reset this. I'll come right back to it. And we'll do our second problem. Okay. So problem number 2, let me get my annotate back up. All right, problem number 2 is going to be, I'm going to show you an example of a 1 solution. So that was a 2 solution. Let's look at a 1 solution. So our problem is going to be 2x squared minus 12x plus 18 equals 0. Okay, and feel free that if I'm going too slow and you're like, hey, I got this, I'm going to go ahead and try to figure this out, go ahead and do that. I'm going to walk through the steps and then show you why this ends up being a 1 solution parabola. All right, so let's start by identifying A, B, and C. I'll put it up here. So A is going to be 2. B is going to be a negative 12. And C is going to be 18. Okay, now we're going to plug it into this formula up here. So biggest question is here, my formula says negative B plus or minus negative B. Well, my B is already negative. So guess what we have to do? If it's already negative and they want it to be negative, 2 negatives are going to cancel to make a positive. So this is actually going to be a positive 12. So x equals positive 12. And then continue the formula. So 12 plus or minus, and then the square root, big long square root. Okay, b squared will be, so this is why I did parentheses before, negative 12 squared. So we really want to be careful with that. Remember, I know before when we did substitution, we talked about this. If you don't square the negative, the calculator is going to give you a negative answer. And this is negative 12 times negative 12. It should end up being a positive. So just be careful with that you put that in parentheses. All right, minus 4 times A, which is 2, and times C, which is 18. All over 2 times A, which is 2. Okay, and if you remember the first step I told you to do was to get this radical down to 1 number. That's the first task here. So negative 12 squared, or 12 squared, is going to be 144. Okay, and then minus, and now we want to do 4 times 2 times 18. I'm just double checking myself here. Yay, okay, so 4 times 2 times 18, if you got that, is 144. So look what happens inside the square root. 144 minus 144 is 0. It's nothing. So that means that we don't have a square root, and the square root cancels. So this whole bad boy, all that work we just did, I don't want to say it's for nothing, but it's nothing. So we don't have a square root anymore, and we don't have this plus or minus anymore. All we have left are these numbers, which is 12 over 2 times 2, which is 4. So I did the bottom 2 times 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So that means this problem only has 1 solution. X is 3. Because, again, the reason why is the square root canceled out. It was 0. So that means there is no plus or minus anymore. And visually, that would mean that this parabola, 1, 2, 3, would cross here at positive 3. It would just sit on the axis like so. And it would have 1 solution. Okay, that one's a little bit easier. The next one's even easier because what happens when there is no solution? Okay. Ready for the last one? I don't want to clear it off unless we got it all written down. I'll give you just a few more seconds. If you need more time, just chat me if you need to write it down. Otherwise, in about 10 seconds, I'll clear it and we'll do our last example, which is a no solution.
For the last one, was it, I didn't get the ending part.
How we got the 3?
No, I'm talking about for the first example.
Oh, okay. How far did you get? Or what's the last thing you wrote down?
-7 plus or minus the square root of 1/2.
Okay. So then the next part would be here. I'll clear. If you guys don't mind, let me just show it real quick. So you said it was -7 plus or minus the square root of 1/2. Okay. Okay. So from here, we want to, we can take the square root of 1, which is just 1. So I'm just going to cancel that out and make it just a 1 because the square root of 1 is just 1. Then we're going to split this into 2 problems because we have the plus and minus. So the first one would be -7 plus 1/2. And the second one would be -7 minus 1/2 because of that plus and minus.
Okay.
You good? You want me to keep going or you good?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, let's go to the last one then. All right, third example is what's going to happen and what is a no solution going to look like? So x squared minus x minus or plus 10. So you can't tell just by looking at the problem what it's going to be. You can only tell once you do the square root. So that's kind of the key. Once you have the square root, which is why I tell you to do that first, then you can tell what kind of solution it's going to be. If you remember back in the day, which I'm not going to make you remember, but if you remember, it was called the discriminant, if that sounds familiar. The discriminant told you how many solutions you had. Okay, so in this problem, our A is 1 because there's an invisible 1 there. Our B is a -1 because, again, there's an invisible 1. And our C is 10. All right, let's start plugging it in. So -B, our B is already negative, so it's going to turn back to a +1. So it'll be +1 plus or minus, and then B squared. So I'll do -1 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, and times C, which is 10. Okay, all over 2 times A, which is 1. All right, so next, remember, go to the square root and get this down to one number. So -1 squared is just going to be a 1. And then minus 4 times 1 times 10. 4 times 1 times 10 is 40. So 1 minus 40 gives me a -39. Okay, does anyone remember what happens in your calculator when you try to take the square root of a negative number? What happens? Anyone remember?
It's an error.
Yes, it is an error. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. Actually, again, we're not going to do this in college algebra, but in algebra 2, you would have learned that this is imaginary. This negative on the inside was an imaginary number. So if this happens and you get a negative number, you get to stop because you can't solve the problem. It's imaginary. There is no real solutions. So we say no real solutions because there is a solution. It's just imaginary. And we're not going to continue the problem. So no real solutions. And that's what you would write on your answer. So this is kind of a fun one. It's easy. Once you see a negative, you get to stop and say no real solution. And what that would mean is this parabola is sitting above the axis. It never crosses it. So there's no real solution. Yay. Okay, so there you go. An example of 2, 1, and no solutions. So go ahead and head back to your daily log. There are 3 examples on there, and there's one of each in no particular order. So go ahead and give those a shot, and I'll let you work for a little bit, and I'll come on if you need some help.